In ancient Greece, it was customary for peddlers who walked the streets with their things to be sold to cry out, "What do you lack?" The idea was to let people know that they were in the vicinity and also rouse the curiosity of the people. Coming out of their houses, they would want to know what the peddler was selling. It might be something they lacked and needed, or simply something they desired. What do you lack? We may have sight and hearing, but what do we lack? Take an honest inventory of yourself. Have you found contentment? Are you close enough to God to receive His guidance and strength? Have you secured peace of heart and peace of mind, invaluable assets in life? Deciding what we lack is the first step in securing it. Christ can fulfill our needs that are to some extent physical, but more so the deepest needs of heart, mind, and soul. The man in Mark chapter 7 lacked the physical ability to hear, but many of us lack the spiritual ability to hear. We suffer a kind of a spiritual deafness, the affliction of not listening to people, or to put it another way, the affliction of physically listening to people yet failing to comprehend, to understand, and come to grips with what they are saying is a plague upon the church. For you see, it is possible to listen to a person yet fail to really hear them. Listening is a skill. It is something that can be acquired. I don't think it is at all an exaggeration to say that you could have no greater impact upon your world than by closing your lips and opening your ears. How can we become better listeners? First, let us take a look at the life of a man who could not hear. One day, as the story goes, Jesus was returning to the region of Galilee when he entered the district of Decapolis. There, a large crowd who brought with them a patient approached him. Mark says of this man that he was deaf and had an impediment in his speech. No doubt the two went together, for hearing and speaking are one process. As one hears, one speaks. It was this man's inability to hear that made his speech so imperfect. Without a doubt, one of the most important senses in Jesus' day was the sense of hearing. For Jesus lived in a world of sound. This is difficult for us to comprehend, for we live in a world of vision. We live in a world of skyscrapers, bright lights, and magnificent sights. A person who cannot hear today still can know what is happening through the miracle of television. He can see what is happening. Not so in the first century Palestine. The rather drab, colorless world of Jesus was not so much a world of vision as it was a world of sound. So important was the sense of sound that one of the predictions of the coming of the Messiah was that the ears of the deaf would be opened. And how many times did Jesus use the words hear and listen? He said, "He who has ears to hear, let him hear." Jesus was not only concerned that people physically listen to him, but that people hear what he was saying. It was this process of spiritual hearing that Jesus was referring to when he told the disciples, "I tell you these things so that hearing them you might hear." Second, to be sure the loss of our hearing would be a tragic event, but no more tragic than having perfect hearing and refusing to listen to those who seek to help us and to love us. What we read this morning is a story of a man who could not hear. But let us secondly consider the life of a man who will not hear. I cannot think of a spiritual disease that has led to more disaster as has this one. I am convinced that not listening to people, failing to hear what they are really saying, has led to more divorces, more family breakups, more runaway children, more mental illness, and more total despondency than any other behavior. To be sure, this story of the healing of a deaf and mute man is first and foremost the story of Jesus' power to heal and therefore confirmation that he is indeed the Messiah. But we must not miss the message implicit in the miracle. Jesus has come to open the ears of a spiritually deaf world. One of Jesus' familiar refrains was, "He who has ears to hear, let him hear." A story is told of a father and his young daughter who had a very strained relationship for some time. Returning from a trip, the father did something that was very unusual for him. As he entered into the room, he presented his daughter with a necklace that he had brought her. Completely overcome with joy by his unexpected act of giving, the young girl inadvertently dropped the necklace and went running from the room with tears in her eyes. She returned shortly only to find, as she walked into the room, that her new necklace was now around the neck of her infant baby sister. "Oh," said the father, "I went on and gave it to her. You didn't like it anyway." Oh, my friends, he wasn't listening. He was not listening. Do you know what our problem is? Do you know what it is? Our problem is that we talk too much. We love the sound of our own voice. And even when we do listen to others, we are usually thinking ahead of what we are going to say as soon as the other guy slows up just a little bit. Too often, we turn the words of Samuel around when he said, "Speak, Lord, your servant listens," until it reads, "Listen, Lord, your servant speaketh." There was a 5th standard teacher who decided that she would use this listening process with her children. Every morning, for 5 minutes, she required them to be totally quiet. That's hard for any of us to do, much less a 5th standard child. She discovered that a great deal of good came from the experience of silence. After one of these quiet times, she asked the students if they had heard anything. One boy said, "Yes, I heard something say that I should be more obedient to my parents." Another said, "I heard something say that you should always be fair. When you are tagged and nobody sees it, you are still out." There is no substitute for listening. Over and over again, Jesus exhibited this quality of spiritual listening. One day, Jesus was teaching to a large multitude in Jerusalem when he was suddenly interrupted by the shouts of a lonely beggar named Bartimaeus. What the crowd heard that day were the rude interruptions of a nobody. What Jesus heard was the cry of a person in need. Third, let's look at how a life can be radically changed when hearing is restored. As the crowd presented this deaf and mute man to Jesus, he placed his finger in his ears and said, "Ephphatha," which means "be opened." With that single word, the prophecy of Isaiah had been fulfilled. A world that had always existed suddenly became real to this man. All of his life he had seen people talking, and all that he could do was mimic them. Now, for the first time, he heard the sound of his native Aramaic. All of his life, he had seen people working in the marketplace and seen the children playing. Now, for the first time, he heard people bartering, and he heard the children's laughter and cries of joy. All of his life, he had seen the temple and the Torah, but now for the first time, he was actually able to hear the religion of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Moses. A world that had always existed suddenly became real to him. How life changes when you hear. Well, let me give you a fair warning. If you once start really hearing people, they are suddenly going to change the way they see the world. May Jesus Christ be praised.